What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another lesson on the right mindset. Today, we are going to work on when imagery becomes purple prose. Some of the things we will touch upon in this video will be identifying purple prose in your novel, balancing purple prose, and imagery. So let's get right to it. Hello, and just before we get into the lesson, let me just throw it out there. The channel grows, the channel gets stronger, the more I can do this. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel by hitting the subscribe button and then the bell icon so you don't miss out. And with that, let's just get right through the lesson today, okay? As I said, it's when imagery becomes purple prose. The intriguing world of purple prose and imagery is an interesting one, right? So the reason today's lesson is going to give us a chance to explore the differences between these two concepts, purple prose, imagery. We'll discuss when and why you might choose to use them, either one, and ultimately how to strike a balance in your writing. Because remember, there's nothing wrong with purple prose, and there's nothing wrong with imagery. However, both could throw off the pacing of your story, and you want to control that by being able to ultimately use either concisely. But with that said, before we dive into identifying and refining purple prose, let's clarify the distinction between imagery and purple prose. Imagery is the use of vivid and descriptive language that appeals to the reader's senses, creating a mental picture or invoking emotion. Purple prose refers to excessively flowery, exaggerated, or melodramatic writing that distracts from the story's core elements. Ooh. While both techniques aim to engage the reader, the key lies in their execution. All right. So, I guess the big question today is how do we identify purple prose in your novel? So, keep in mind that it's not about completely eradicating purple prose from your novels, but rather recognizing when it might hinder the overall impact of your storytelling. Here are 3 things to identify that you should be looking for to make sure that your purple prose are not taking away from the story narrative or disrupting your pacing. Overindulgent descriptions. That's number 1. Overindulgent descriptions. Look out for excessively long sentences or paragraphs. These paragraphs might be filled with ornate language that may overshadow the plot or character development. Ultimately, are you giving more precedence to your purple prose and skill at using the English lexicon and manipulating it in a way that allows you to continue on without periods, comma, to continue going and illuminating your reader on how smart you are? Well, you might want to rethink that sentence. 2, disconnected metaphors. You want to identify metaphors or similes that are convoluted or don't align with the narrative's tone, theme, or atmosphere. Again, this might be something where it's really pretty, it's a great metaphor, maybe you're using a wonderful simile, but it just doesn't work within the context of where you're going. You might be writing a dark novel based on urban story in the city, and it's just your metaphor ends up talking about flowers or like the sunset or the life and times of somebody. That is not a part of this world, when in fact the situation you're writing is dire. Those just don't work together. You want to kind of like say, hey, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't. I mean, anything could work. You just got to be good at what you do, right? Let's do number 3, monotonous, monotonous, monotonous rhyme, all right, or monotonous rhythm. Be cautious of repetitive sentence structures or a consistent use of overly complex vocabulary. These elements might detract from the flow of your prose. All right, so with that said, we're going to do some examples because why not? Let's do this. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, so there you go. Let's read it first. You ready? The moon, a celestial goddess, cast its luminescent gaze upon the simmering lake, its surface a mirror of diamonds reflecting the heavens above. The gentle breeze whispered through the ancient trees, their emerald leaves trembling in anticipation. Sarah's heart, a fragile flower caught in the tempestuous storm of love, yearned for his touch, a burning ember igniting her very soul. All right, this would be considered purple prosy to the umpteenth level. So let's examine this passage and identify the purple prosy. Well, this passage includes descriptive language and evocative imagery. It ventures into purple prose territory. Why? Because, well, if we look at the 3 things, it does what we mentioned: the overuse of metaphors, the heightened emotions, and excessively flowery language has the potential to distract the reader from the core narrative, despite my reading of it. When we can identify such instances, this allows us to refine our writing and strike a balance. This balance keeps the readers engaged while maintaining integrity. Now, for example, the moon. A celestial goddess cast its luminescent gaze upon the shimmering light. It's like this. This is a long sentence. This is a very long sentence, and my rule when it comes to writing is that each sentence should do something for the narrative, right, and help build on the narrative, while also adding to the plot and or character and or world building, right? Because your 3 things that you want to do first and foremost is plot, character, and world building, right? Those are 3 essential things that help a story become something interesting as we discover those elements, right? So does it help the pacing overall? Like whatever you put in there. So the moon, the celestial goddess, cast its luminescent gaze upon the shimmering lake, its surface a mirror of diamonds reflecting the heaven's moon. This doesn't feel like it does anything. We're not learning about the character, we're not learning about the plot, and we are definitely not world building. You might say, well, shimmering lake, Thomas. Yeah, but the shimmering lake, what's the name of the lake? Right? And then you go, what about the celestial god? The moon. The moon is acting like a celestial goddess. Well, what does that mean? What does the moon have a name? Does the moon have a specific color or tone to it? We're not learning any of the 3 important elements to a story, and we're not building a narrative. All we are doing is being 100% descriptive, and therefore it is taking away from your control, the pacing, because we haven't gotten anywhere of substance yet. So pacing, which would be in another video, but ultimately what pacing is you want to maintain the fluid movement of your narrative. And as we say on this channel, narrative is made up of 2 things: plot, which is what needs to happen, and story, how it unfolds. The plot is literally what needs to happen. Story and how it unfolds is your character development and world building. So the way those elements are presented, right, fluff up the plot and therefore make a strong narrative. And if you keep to those movements and you maintain consistency with that, you have good pacing. But if you veer off from those things to just kind of pontificate, or in this case, just say that the moon is making a pretty image, it's not doing anything. I mean, one thing you could do is name the moon. However, you could put into the perspective, the POV of a character uh, noticing the moon. It actually influences the character, therefore, character development. It influences the character to take notice of the moon. Okay? Moving on. The gentle breeze whispered through the ancient trees, their emerald leaves trembling anticipation. This also does not accomplish any of the three. It does not accomplish plot, character development, and or world building. It doesn't move the narrative forward. This, again, is descriptive. However, a simple fix is allowing the character to move through these moments. The moon's specific style captures the character, in this case, Sarah's interest. It allows her to pause. It is something about it that becomes reflective internally or externally. It allows her to notice something. It pulls her out of a thought, whatever, as long as the character is moving through that experience, which we know is story, right? Because story is through the character's experience and through the world building they learn and you, the reader, discover. So in this situation, 2 long sentences did nothing for the narrative. It didn't help plot, it didn't help character development, and it definitely didn't world build. All right. Again, what kind of ancient trees? Are the ancient trees important to the narrative? Do they help the plot? Do they help with world building? Or do they help with character? If they don't help with any one of those 3 things, we don't need to know that this thing is happening. Again, though, a simple fix is just allowing the character to move through it. Are trees important to them? Do they notice the trees? Do they interact with the trees? Whatever the case may be. Sarah's heart, a fragile flower, caught in the tempestuous storm of love, yearn for his touch, burning ember igniting her. Right? All right. Right off the bat, we're being told. We're not getting to see anything with this. This is not showing. This is just telling you that her heart, a fragile flower, really is yearning for his touch. Whose touch? Burning the ember, igniting her very soul. Again, we might have some plot here, but because it's so vague, and again, you can be vague as long as it's informative. And we're not informing anything. We're not informing Sarah as a character, other than we're telling the reader she yearns for his touch and she's caught up in this. She is a fragile flower, but that's telling. And we're not showing her being a fragile flower. We're not showing her yearning for his touch. We're not showing her heart and very soul igniting with the burning ember, right? So these 3 sentences in themselves are not effectively pulling the reader through narrative. And therefore, this fails the test, and it's overuse of purple prose. And the purple prose in themselves are not actually elevating the scene. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to balancing purple prose and imagery. Achieving a balance between purple prose and imagery is key to engaging your readers without overwhelming them. Here are a few techniques to help you clean up purple prose and create harmonious blend of both styles. Strategic placement. Choose pivotal moments in your story where the use of purple prose can add flair and create a memorable impact. Meaning the purple prose add to the narrative, either plot, character development, or world building in a way that pulls you into that moment and allows it to stand out emotionally for the reader. Be cautious not to overload less important scenes or risk diluting their significance. This is basically taking a moment and allowing us to be pulled into it with amazing showing and then using purple prose or imagery to overwhelm the situation. This also disrupts your pacing. Keep in mind, there's a difference between allowing us to kind of be in a moment for one, two, maybe three sentences, or a paragraph, like a passage, and then there's dialogue, a chunk of passage to explain what's going on and show their environment. A line of dialogue, which could be like 4 or 5 words, and then we do it again. There's another passage. Now we're getting into the realm of overdoing it. One of the secrets to really great writing using purple prose and imagery is describing and illuminating the scene enough where the reader can actually take the baton from you and run with it and allow their mind to fill in the blanks. Because our job is to create the world enough to where they're not in a white room of emptiness floating in space, but enough where the reader can take it and let their imagination, which is far stronger than anything we can write, because they get to emotionally move through it, and let them take it and take it to the next level. So sometimes you don't want to overdo it with showing and describing and telling. You just kind of want to be like, this is the thing, let it happen. And with that said, finally, with strategic placement, sometimes you need to get information out, which is understandable, and you need to move the scene along, or the character simply needs to open the door and move on. See, there is a difference between, well, do we have to show that the character struggles to open the door, looking behind their back. They feel the presence on them as they shiver through the emptiness of the room and hear the footsteps approaching down the stairs as it echoes across the wooden floor. Okay, we might want to show that. But if they're just leaving an apartment, like they just had a scene and they open the door and leave. Well, how about they leave through the door? Like sometimes it's that simple to just have it happen, because narratively it's not doing anything, but you still want to invoke movement. You don't have to go into they turn to leave the room. They turn to leave the conversation, walking across the beautiful, bourbon colored rug as they grab the handle on the metal, intricately designed handle of the door, turning it with just enough strength to hear the flicker through to Rachel's ears as she opens the door, shot in the face with light and wind. Like, what is that doing? Nothing. 2, balancing purple prose and imagery. We do this through sensory focus. Emphasize vivid imagery that stimulates the reader's senses, allowing them to immerse themselves in your story world. You want to engage your reader with sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell to transport your audience into your narrative. Keep in mind, there is another sense, time. You can use time as a sense. They sense the amount of time or movement of time. That's important too, beyond just sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. If you feel you need to fatten up a beat, scene, or adjust the pacing, think of how the character experiences their world. Remember, this is the showing. This also helps with development of the character development, but also developing the character through world building and allowing the plot to breathe through the character's experience. And bear in mind, this allows the experience to move the narrative forward instead of describing the room or showing cool things you want the audience to see. Basically everything needs to have a purpose, or why is it there. You don't want to put a character in a situation where they're describing a house, a castle, a boat, the city streets, because you want your audience to know how beautiful or awesome or scary or dark or the architecture has a specific thing about it. That doesn't do anything narratively. However, there's nothing wrong with those elements being pulled through the narrative as long as the character is experiencing it. A character walking through the city in a conversation with somebody, a character fighting in a city, a character running away from someone in a city, a character sitting down at a restaurant with somebody they love, and the scenery itself is a part of the character's experience. That's different. Now we're talking about it being important because it's through the character. Again, here's a third thing about balancing purple prose and imagery. You want to edit and revise. Polish your writing by eliminating unnecessary adjectives and adverbs and simplifying convoluted scenes. Remember, just because you wrote it doesn't mean it stays that way. A first draft is that because there are more to come. And it's all right if you alter things. Besides, if you really don't want to change anything, but you know you have to, save that version, put it aside, and you have it forever. But work on it to see where you can take it. And that's draft number 2. And if you like that, but you know it needs work, save that and put it to the side. Now that version of your story exists. Because the story you're going to ultimately publish is not going to be the story you worked out. They're going to be different. There's going to be elements that change throughout it. So, polishing your writing by eliminating unnecessary adjectives and adverbs and simplifying convoluted sentences. What will this do? This will ensure that every word serves a purpose. Remember, if it's there, it needs to serve a purpose. This process will help you maintain clarity while preserving the artistic integrity of your prose. Think about what you write by asking yourself, what does this accomplish? If it doesn't move the narrative, character development, world building, or ultimately the experience of the character in that world, it might not need to be there. You want your narrative to be pushed forward through your characters, experiencing the world, therefore world building. Or you want to figure out a way to incorporate what you want to show the audience by letting it drive those elements. So again, I want to show that there's a specific tapestry in a building, and I just love the way I described it when I was thinking about it. So I want a character to see that. Well, make sure the tapestry isn't the reason the character sees it. Make sure that the character sees it through a narrative purpose. Again, they're sitting in an office. They're walking with somebody. They're running through there, trying to survive themselves. Somebody mentions the tapestry that's in the castle or the palace or a museum, and then your character finds themselves there for a narrative purpose, and they're like, oh wait, that thing is here, and they end up seeing it and they go, oh, there it is, so and so told me about it. Like, let it leak in through purpose, which brings us to an example. So let me read it first. The moon cast its gentle glow upon the tranquil lake, transforming its surface into a shimmering tapestry of reflected light. A soft breeze rustled through the ancient trees, their emerald leaves quivering with anticipation. Sarah's heart yearned for his touch, a longing so intense it felt as if her heart had caught fire. Now, this is a cleaned up version of the one we just showed. However, why don't we take this and create, real quick, we will create a more inclusive version of this, utilizing plot, character development, and world building. Okay, Sarah cross the okay. Sarah moved across the riverbank. Sarah moved across the riverbank. The moon cast its gentle glow upon the tranquil lake. The light itself caught her eye, pulling her from her thoughts of him. Okay. Her heart fluttered with images of Jonathan. Let's see. Her words and the beats of her love. It was as if he heard her words and the beats of her love, and uh, sent a soft breeze across the river, rustling through the ancient trees of Davir. All right. So, again, remember, every sentence should move to the next sentence, and everything should have something to do with either. By the way, it's either or all three or some of them, right? So it's either character development, or I should say, it's either plot, character development, and or world building. And you could do any two of those. You could do three of them. You could do, but one of them has to be there. So Sarah moved across the riverbank. The moon cast its gentle glow upon the tranquil lake. A couple things are happening here. One, we're moving plot. Sarah is doing something, and we need to describe her environment through her experience. She moved across the riverbank, so we know she's walking on the riverbank. That serves character development, because not everyone would walk along riverbank. And we justify it by allowing the light itself caught her eye, pulling her from her thoughts of him. So the purpose of the moon casts its gentle glow upon the tranquil lake leads into movement from the character. So the glow itself pulled her up. Therefore, plot is moving us forward, right? And she's experiencing it. And what was she? She was in thought. So we know that she moved across the riverbank. What? In thought. So we now fill up these two sentences with we fill up one moment, right? And the light itself caught her eye, pulling her from her thoughts of him. Oh, who's him? Well, now we know. Her heart fluttered with images of Jonathan. Now we know who him is. We know Jonathan is the character. We're now world building. We're defining the character, and we're adding some plot. We know that she's in love with him. And by the way, she's yearning for his touch. It was as if he heard her words in the beats. In the beat of her heart. Is that right? Yeah. In the beat of her heart, her love, and sent a soft breeze across the river, rustling through the ancient trees of Davir. So now world building. We know that these are ancient trees of Davir. So she's in Davir, and we're connecting her. We're saying that she's a romantic at heart. Literally, she's allowing the breeze in her mind to be an extension of Jonathan, that literally she feels the world is moving because he can hear and feel her. And now you're telling a greater, stronger story. And that is the difference between using purple prose for purple prose sake and imagery for imagery's sake. You want it to work towards the narrative. You pull things through the moment. Okay? Or at least that's my method. That doesn't necessarily mean it works for everybody. But it's important to look at it that way, okay? And the reason I did this, why I worked it the way, is because you want to focus on capturing the essence of the scene with vivid imagery while keeping the emotions genuine and relatable. You want to understand Sarah or Jonathan or any character, and you do this by finding a balance between the imagery and artistry of purple prose. You know, part. Okay, good. Stop. So, as if he heard her words in the beat of her love. Now that's purple prosy. That's, we're being playful with that, right? The moon casts its gentle glow upon the tranquil lake. Again, we're being purpley playful with it, right? But there's imagery to it, and then we're allowing that imagery to actually pull the narrative forward. Okay. Striving for a balance in your writing. Oh, let's just make sure you know this. Striving for a balance in your writing allows you to create a captivating narrative. Narratives that draw readers in while preserving the core elements of your story. It's a delicate art form that we learn as writers with practice and careful revision. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean it stays that way. Allow yourself to feel comfortable and trying things, moving things, touching things, changing things, because you could always save that version to the side and you'll have it forever. But do not allow your work to become stilted because you don't feel it needs the work. A first draft is not your last draft, I assure you. Final thoughts. Ultimately, the decision to use purple prose or focus more on imagery is a personal choice. Each writer has their unique style and creative preferences. It's important to remember that writing is a form of self expression, and you should craft your story in a way that resonates with you. Whatever you do, remember that striking the right balance between imagery and purple prose does something important for your story. It allows you to enhance your storytelling without overshadowing its core elements. At the end of the day, it's your story. As a writer, you have the power to shape your narrative and captivate your readers. Oh, excellent. The next video in this series will focus on world building, how to craft rich and believable settings for your novel. In our next video, we'll explore the fascinating realm of world building in a way that shows you how to discover basically a way to create immersive and believable settings that captivate your reader's imagination. Question: what techniques do you use to find that perfect balance between imagery and purple prose in your writing? And how do they impact your storytelling? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Yeah. All right. And of course, if you like what you watched, and if you've not done so already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out. And I guess that's it, right? So as always, you know how it is. Wait. I got to get the button. Keep developing the right mindset. See you next time. Bye.